Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Bethany McKenzie was thrust into the world of type 1 diabetes when her son was diagnosed with the disease in 2015. Her family discovered this when Bethany came back from a trip and noticed her son, River, had his weight drop from 46 to 40 pounds. Immediately, she rushed him to the hospital and he was diagnosed. Eventually, she realized that she would have to change the way that her family ate despite the advice from her doctors and dietitians. For several years, Bethany followed their rules, only to find their son truly felt horrible and unhealthy, experiencing headaches and high blood sugar. Bethany eventually found low carbohydrate diets that have, with careful control, worked wonders for her son and for her family. She is the executive producer of the incredible documentary, The Diabetes Solution, modeled after the work of Dr. Richard Bernstein in the field of diabetes and insulin. She is also the founder of Let Me Be 83, a movement by the Revere Foundation. They advocate for an alternative diabetes management regimen anchored in nutrition and the proper use of insulins that allows people with diabetes to achieve healthy blood glucose levels. Bethany McKenzie, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey. It's great to be here.
It's great to host you. It's cool to learn that you have some ties to Utah, as you used to come to Park City in the summers. It's quite fun. Love skiing up there.
It's the best skiing. I feel like it's the best skiing in the country.
Normally, we really try to promote Colorado for the best skiing. It's getting so crowded around here, so I might edit that out later and tell everybody go to Telluride, go to the Colorado Resort. No, it is. It's been awesome. We've had some really good snow years the past few years, but we're getting off to a really, really slow start. So we need a little bit more snow around here. But it's cool that you had that history, and be careful not to promote Utah too much. We don't want the secret to get out too wide. Oh my goodness. Okay, your documentary is unbelievable. It is enraging, I have to say. Going through years of learning about low carbohydrate diets and the advice that we're given and all this stuff, you go through phases of like being super upset, really mad, pissed off. And your documentary definitely had that effect. I do have to say, I hope you find this funny. I thought it was funny. The picture of River when he was first diagnosed, obviously probably wasn't the best day you like to revisit, but he's sitting in the hospital bed. He's making a peace sign. And for whatever reason, the way his index finger is, you almost can't really see it. So I had to like triple check, like, is he flipping off the camera? Like, this kid is savage. Does he already know that this advice is terrible? Like, he's already caught on.
Right. And at that age, I do have a lot of photos of him with the middle finger up. There are some on my blog, but yeah, isn't that funny? I've never noticed that with that photo, but I know exactly what photo you're talking about.
For whatever reason, his index finger is like the same color of the shading of the face, and so it just blended in. And I'm like, wow, that's impressive. I like that.
Oh, funny.
Yeah, so that's the funny side of things. Boy, yeah, again, the documentary, it's interesting to talk to the people that we've talked to about type 1 diabetes, a lot of people that were hosted in the documentary as well. And talking is one thing, but really seeing it is quite another. And you see all these adorable kids, you see these parents who are very smart. All of you are incredibly smart and dedicated to what is now a life sentence of a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week job to keep your child alive. Pretty serious stuff. And you see, I want to use the word I think you use in the documentary. You see parents floundering around, like you're doing the very best you can for the best motives of a disease that was fatal like 100 years ago. What is it like to get the diagnosis and try to manage the way they teach you to manage?
Oh gosh. I mean, in preparation for talking with you, I've gone over our whole history, and I can emotionally get back to that. Like you said, we returned from a trip, and I had weighed River before we left on the trip, because in case he had like a fever while we were gone, the babysitter would know how much Tylenol to give him. So we got back, he had lost all of this weight. It was very clear something was wrong. We knew immediately he had type 1 diabetes. It's a very simple, they knew by checking his urine in the office and then transferring us to the hospital. My story is different than most, or a little unique, in that I come from a long line of doctors. My dad's a doctor, my brother's a doctor, my husband's a doctor, several in-laws are physicians. I grew up absolutely trusting every word a physician said to me. I had no reason not to. I lived with them. I saw their caring heart. I knew about their training, their long hours, how intelligent these doctors are. So when we were in the hospital and they told us the diagnosis, I'm a doer, right? I love this kid and I'm a doer and I'm going to figure this out. And I'm a smart girl. Math is my strong suit. And when they told me to apply a mathematical ratio to figure out a dose and count these carbs, I was going to be the very best person at that job. Like I do all, I'm doing it. I'm committing to it. And they taught me the math part first, and then they brought me to the dietitian. And in that room, they have those little plastic fake foods. And we had to do a mock-up breakfast for my son. And she placed 2 pancakes down and a 1/4 cup of fake plastic syrup and a big glass of orange juice. And my husband said he watched my face just drop. Something within me knew what I was being taught wasn't right. However, I believe these people. I know that doctors do, they do the right thing. I just, it was such a conflict within my mind that something didn't feel right, but I'm a pleasant Midwestern woman. I'm going to do as I'm told. I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to count those carbohydrates like it's my absolute job. Excuse me. So when we left the hospital, I took them at their word. I did exactly what they said. And our life was chaos. You know, at first, the emotions don't sink in because you are literally just trying to adapt to this new way of life and keep your child alive, and you're up at night. And then after about a year or two, like it was starting to affect us personally. Like my flame was being muted. I lost my personality to this disease that took over. And my kids are busy kids. At that time, you know, they went to a immersion school and did classical guitar and played tennis and were busy, and we had this other thing, and it just took over our lives. And so about 3 years into his diagnosis, unlike most of the people you've probably interviewed who Googled and found a book right away and made the transition in their life right away, it took me 3 years. So when I speak to our audience about knowing what it was like to be high carb, we had 3 years of very high carb, like very standard American diet, high carb. But I was on social media one day and we had hit rock bottom. We left town one time in those 3 years and had a babysitter come watch River. I took my parents to the Adele concert, and we hired a medical student and a paramedic. They were married, to watch River. And I gave them all the instructions. They're very, very capable people. And a dose of insulin got missed. It happens, right? They took him to the pool. They ordered a cheeseburger and French fries, forgot to give an insulin dose. And I'm sitting in the Adele concert and I'm watching his CGM climb and climb and climb and climb. And, you know, then it's reading high with an arrow across, and I'm 4 hours away. And so this is the cycle you see parents do. Then we're giving insulin and we're giving more insulin. We're giving more insulin. And he's starting to come down, and I'm still in the Adele concert. And then his CGM takes the turn for the worse and starts dropping straight down. My point in telling you this is that was my absolute rock bottom. I was away from him. I was panicking. I was in a show concert that I wasn't enjoying. And on our drive home from Minneapolis, which is 4 hours away from where I live, I posted in just a Dexcom Facebook group. And I had never been the type of person to seek help on the internet. I go to doctors, right? I'm a trusting woman. I use them as my resource. But for the first time, I reached out on the internet and said, how are you people doing this? I see some of you with these normal blood sugars. And back then it was pretty taboo to talk about. And I made people would comment, we use a CGM. Well, yes, we do too. We pre-bolus for our food, which means dosing like 20 minutes ahead of eating. Yes, we do too. We have a diabetes alert dog. We do too. Like all of the things. And then every 5th, 7th, 10th comment, someone would say, we eat a low carb diet. And then the comments, we use a dog, we use a pre-bolus, we use a low carb diet. And this is the first time I'd ever heard of this in 3 years of having diabetes. First time I'd ever heard that, whoa, wait a minute, you don't have to do the 1/4 cup of syrup and the big glass of orange juice to justify the insulin dose. And so within those comments, they recommended the book. I ordered it on the drive home. I go back in my Amazon history and it's right there. I ordered the book on July 5th, came home, and once I knew better, even just people telling me that comment, I could never look back. we went home, my kitchen was under construction, and we quit carbs cold turkey, because that's what we do. Like, when we knew that was better for him, we implemented it immediately. And it was so life-changing from the first meal. I mean, I remember I gave him eggs and bacon, typical, like normal breakfast foods, and I couldn't believe there was no crazy blood sugar spike. And I posted it in this new group, Type 1 Grit, that I had been welcomed into because I bought and read the book. And they're like, oh yeah, that's super normal. Like, it was 80 and flat. And I just had never seen something like that. And the joy that comes from the peace, but also the anger, like I was so duped. Someone kept the truth from me. I was viciously angry. And so we had an endocrinology appointment coming up right after that. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to go tell them about this, because certainly they haven't heard. Otherwise they would have told me. Like, truly, I was that like giddy, skipping in there. I can't wait to tell them. And I got the typical, right in front of my 8-year-old at the time, the doctor said, this is not sustainable. He will resent you for the rest of his life. You know, and I'm sure you've heard with other guests, he won't grow, his brain won't develop, all of the things. It wasn't going to stop me, but from that moment on, it was my job to make sure people knew this existed, because I was.
Did it scare you?
No. I mean, it takes courage. I think any of the people who hear that their child won't grow or their brain won't develop, that is such a scary hurdle to overcome as a parent. But I saw the blood sugars. Like, I'd already had a couple of weeks of eggs and bacon and normal blood sugars, that I was able to decipher that this doctor wasn't willing to even consider this. The interesting part is he was a vegan. He ate a restrictive diet, which was sustainable for him. And he kept saying, oh, it's Atkins, meat and cheese. And it's like, I know that their training was flawed. I know that nutrition isn't covered. The part to me that's unforgivable is that there's not a curiosity from the most educated, highly trained people in society to say, well, wait a minute. Is it meat and cheese? Is that all he's eating? How are you doing this? You make pancakes with almond flour? I didn't know that. Like, let me look into this for you, because I don't have any patients doing this. I've never heard of this, or I don't know about this. But I left feeling like a terrible mother, but it didn't change what I was going to do, because the joy of my child sleeping through the night and not running after him with a needle of insulin or a thing of glucose, it was just so life-changing. So
it was hard not to get emotional watching the documentary, and it's hard not to get emotional now. I can feel like my eyes clouding up a bit. It's crazy. RD said something when I interviewed him a few weeks ago, and he said that at some point, if you're acknowledging that your child needs to change their diet, the parent needs to kind of accept that they also have some food addiction problems that they need to acknowledge as well. But it's like, I don't know how you juggle those two things and say that, like, okay, yeah, maybe you have to change your diet, and that's going to be tough. You're going to change the diet of your family, but this is your child's life. Why would you not have that curiosity, like you said? Like,
right. Well, I mean, they scare us saying your child won't grow, their brain won't develop, right? We're going to attack literally the biggest things about raising a kid is to get them to adulthood as a grown human and making sure they're smart enough to be prepared for the world. What if, Casey, what if they said to the parent, if you don't change their diet, they might be blind by age 35. If you don't change your son's diet, he might have erectile dysfunction by the age of 30. Do you think a parent would then take that seriously? They need to scare. Complications are real. I want to have grandkids someday. If a doctor had said that to me right away, well, if a doctor had offered me dietary changes, instantly I would have chosen that route. But even if I hadn't ever heard of that or wouldn't consider it, if someone said my kid could go blind, you better believe I'm changing our diets. They underplay the complications, especially in a pediatric office, because those doctors only see patients until they're 18. Most kids won't have a complication by age 18, but my husband's an orthopedic surgeon. He sees people in their 20s who need amputations or who have neuropathy. So we can't do this mystical, magical thinking that complications don't exist in children. They are brewing, and it's important.
Okay, well, I said earlier, you need to see it. And it's one thing to talk about, but to see it is another. Like, you need to go watch Vinnie Tortorich's Fat, a documentary, to see a diabetic leg amputation. Yes. You can't unsee that. You can't turn away fast enough to see how terrible that is. And I want to talk about different parts of your documentary. I'll be skipping around a little bit, but one of the great things that you did is you did show it. You were interviewing a woman later in life who has gone through her life with all of these complications. You see what the retina, I don't remember what it was called, but like the blood vessels in the retina, and her eye is completely red, and you see her leg, and it's like all the sores and the bleeding, and she's saying, like, they never told me anything about diet, and they never said anything. I wish I would have known a little bit earlier. And then it fades out, and you see the message. It's brutal. It's brutal.
She had no options. She was a lovely woman. I think I put a photo of her when she was on Jeopardy in that clip. That was one of the photos of her. Absolutely brilliant. Followed her doctor's advice. Ended up with a tragic tragedy. I mean, she hurt everywhere. And I mean, that's the other thing they threaten us with, is that your child will have mental health issues or an eating disorder. They'll resent you for life. No, my adult son at age 40, if I chose, Fruit Loops over his vision, that kid's going to resent me, right? Not the kid who grew up fit and smart and had a normal childhood because they could actually go do things. Like, it's just, she was a dear friend and we miss her, but she wanted that story told. And it is powerful because when a complication is so far into the future, people just don't give it thought.
Yeah. I didn't think it would take that turn. It really caught me off guard. And I'm like, okay, this is the nice step to an improvement. And to see the next screen in loving memory was like, oh my goodness, this is insane. I want to ask, as you were kind of learning about this, everything was getting better with your son. You're feeling amazing. How did you want to? I'm sure making a documentary is not the first thing that came to your mind. Like, how did you want to kind of share this around? Was it like talking to other people? Did you know other people that were dealing with type 1 diabetes? Like, what was your kind of thoughts around, like, wow, this is really important, and I want to actually get this out there? In what ways were you going to try to do that?
Well, I had already started a Facebook blog, a little mommy blog about our diabetes journey. And so I had a small audience, right? And it used to be called Full of Sugar, which I gag at myself. Why? I mean, what a hideous name. I did a brand change, right? When we changed our diet. Some people were very critical in the comments. I know you've heard about all the trolls, but I already had a small audience. The part of the story that I haven't told you is that right when River was diagnosed, like many loving parents, I wanted to be part of a community. So we joined the local ADA chapter and did the bike rides and did all of the things. And I was the top fundraiser in the state. People are so loving. We raised lots of money. But once I knew that this was the association setting the guidelines that were hurting my son, I couldn't give them another penny. And so that's why in 2016, I created the foundation so that any dollars people wanted to donate towards a diabetes cause would actually be used for good. It's obviously not the same tug at your heartstrings when I ask strangers to give money to a diabetes association that promotes healthy eating, because any lay person goes, well, duh, eat healthy, you have diabetes. But we did raise money. And I'm such a big part of this type 1 grit community, especially as I was learning, that I felt that this foundation had to represent their wishes. And I had raised enough money to do something big, a big project. And I said, what would you like to see? Like, how should we get the story out? And so many people thought a documentary would be perfect for visual learners. We could tell the story. We can show the beautiful kids that they're growing and they're strong and they're athletic, and show some CGM graphs, interview doctors. And so I used the money that I had raised to make this documentary. I am not trained to do this. It was an absolute blast, because when you know what you want people to hear, the story somewhat writes itself. But since you've recently watched it, the fun details are that our filming locations were in hotels. We used like the long hallway towards a convention center and tried to make it look like a hospital hallway. And that's where we interviewed my husband. But we were in a hotel. I got permission from them. Every backdrop was in the hotel. And to save money, like my son had to go to DC for a conference. I found people near DC who would travel to me to interview them at our hotel in DC. So it was very, very low budget, the filming. I found a great editor in Washington, DC. He told the story. He was a blast to work with. That's a project that was requested by the community. They helped raise the funds for it. And so that's why we chose to do that project. And it was a blast.
It's amazing. It came out great. Was it hard for you to find parents? I imagine most parents that have already discovered this would be coming out of the woodworks to tell a story like this.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no, wasn't hard to find anyone. And even Dr. Bernstein was interviewed in 2020 during COVID.
Wow.
He agreed to be interviewed during the height of COVID in the state of New York.
Wow.
People want this story to be told. I mean, for so long, we were the crazy ones. People love to label us as being part of a cult, just like that, like ruthless CrossFit cult of those people who love exercise. I mean, you attach some negative name to group of people doing good things, you know, they want to paint us as crazy, but
yeah,
everyone wanted to participate.
Good. It's amazing. You expect the passion from the parents who have learned this way of eating. And obviously somebody like, you know, the Wesley family, mom and the Wesley family is such a mama bear, just like you, like, just so passionate about it. But you also, I really liked getting to know the kids themselves and getting some of the before and after footage. These kids are miserable. They are not having a good time with any of this. They don't want to do this. And it makes sense that you see like Artie's kid who's like, well, maybe I just won't have the carbohydrates then. Can we just do that? Like Ryan Attar did saying it in just like such a funny way when his endocrinologist told him, and he's like, well, do you want me to just not eat the carbs then? I could just do that. Like,
that darling. Yeah. I know kids are smart and they underestimate kids. That's the other thing, is like, don't underestimate what I'm capable of doing or what my kid is capable of doing. And people put so much emotion behind it. Like in our family, we wear seatbelts when we ride in a car. We wear helmets when we bicycle, we floss our teeth, and we eat a healthy diet. Done. It's not like this big emotional, oh no, now we're not doing this. It's who we are. It's how we raised our kids, and they don't rebel. And I listen to RDs, you know, people are always looking for this gotcha moment, like, oh, the kid's going to rebel or he's going to hate this. It could not be easier to feed my teenage son a healthy diet. He would, if someone paid him, because Lord knows I wouldn't do that, but if someone said, here, try this, I'll give you money, he would never, he doesn't care. And people find that so hard to believe. He's not a robot. Things like when his CGM fails, that's annoying. He's a teenager, that's annoying, but eating burger and steaks and delicious healthy food, that doesn't bother him at all.
Not suffering that much. No, you hear from kids who don't even have type 1 diabetes, like parents who find low carbohydrate diets, and that's helping them, and they start changing the diet of the family. And yeah, there might be some, you know, difficulties in the very beginning when somebody's changing their kid's diet, but you're right, these kids are very smart and they prefer to perform well in sports, and they prefer to be good, awake students. I was not awake in high school. I was always asleep in first period and fourth period after lunch because I was exhausted. And like these kids, like they prefer it. They want it. They eat the cake at the birthday party. Then they feel terrible and they don't want to eat the cake anymore. Like, you're right. We definitely don't give our kids enough credit.
We don't give them credit. And it's like such a joy to have a teenager. They're very reasonable people. So we have conversations a lot now about diabetes. And we were talking just the other day, like this whole ability to delay gratification, to have logical consequences to your actions, right? You eat the French fries, you're going to feel like crap. My son is so logical. He's better than I am. He had a 6 a.m. football lifting session this morning. So we went to bed at 9 p.m. because he wanted to get 8 hours of sleep before before school day. He, if there's a low carb treat, he might eat once in a while, but if he eats too much of it, it might make his tummy hurt. So he just has like a cup of ice cream. It's his ability to link the decision to the consequence that's just so mature and impressive to watch as his mom. And I absolutely credit that to being aware of his body and making changes and really listening to how he feels.
Yeah.
It's life skills that I couldn't have taught him without this.
It's amazing. Yeah. And the best part of that is he will, again, manage the disease, but also be healthy because he's eating the correct diet to begin with anyway. So he'll thrive in sports and tennis and all the stuff he does anyway, just like RD's kid playing football. Like you're healthier than the other kids anyway.
Right. And you ask a 16-year-old, would you rather eat pizza or would you rather be a stud football player?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if they have to choose one or the other, lots of stud football players probably eat pizza, but if there's one or the other, the kid's going to say, I want to play football.
Totally. Well, okay. So the storytelling is amazing. Again, following the arc of the story, getting to know Dr. Bernstein was great. It was interesting too, because you watch the documentary and it's maybe like 35, 40 minutes in where it's all pretty much been like the bad side of the story, and you're wondering like when's the good part going to come. But you also not only talk about the science, which is important, but you also discuss the American Diabetes Association, for example. And there's certain lines that can really hit home for certain people, like having Dr. Thomas Seyfried come on our show and say that cancer is a revenue creating disease. Like, boom, have that hit you upside the head. Think about that for a second. And there was something relatively early in the documentary where you're talking about the American Diabetes Association, where they're getting their funding. And the line said something like, and for the last 50 years, they've been spreading a lie that you don't need to change your diet for diabetes while all of these industries are profiting. It's one of those lines you hear. I remember exactly where I was the first time I heard it. Let that sink home. Can you tell us why you decided not to do the runs and the bike rides and donate one more penny to the American Diabetes Association, the association that is supposed to be helping us out of this mess?
They're the problem. I mean, if we're going to keep going backwards, is it the doctor? No, maybe it's not the doctor. Maybe it's his medical school. No, but it's not the medical school. Who's making the education? Who's coming up with these guidelines? And it's the American Diabetes. So all fingers point back to the American Diabetes Association for me. There's so many reasons I can't give many of these places money, but I mean, that's everything about them promotes sickness in the people they are supposed to protect. The American Diabetes Association posts holiday recipes with a cup of sweetened condensed milk, or, blueberry this with a cup of sugar. And they're hiding behind the blueberry because people think a blueberry is healthy. They're making sick people sicker, and they're lying in front of our faces. And fortunately, now it's fashionable to question what we're being told. I mean, I think we've come a long way since 2021 when it was released. I started filming in 2018. Back then, people weren't questioning. They got their little packet from the ADA. They got their Mickey Mouse cookbook that I talked about, and they just did that. But also these organizations, if you look at the former JDRF, it's called Breakthrough now, for a few years ago, they posted where their money goes. I think it was something like 6% actually goes to research for a cure. And any organization that's going to host a pasta feed to raise money, I can't get behind that. So once my foundation was created, we've hosted a gala 3 times. We had to take a couple of years off because of COVID. Everything about the entire weekend is all food friendly. You don't hear RD likes to say, the symphony of CGM alarms. The kids aren't running around bouncing off the walls with weird blood sugars. All the food is meant for them. It's healthy for them. Everyone feels supported. It's a community. I want to protect the people that our foundation serves, and that's children and families with type 1 diabetes. Yeah. The interesting thing is, along the way, when I was filming in Washington, D.C., for the documentary, I reached out to the new CEO for the American Diabetes Association. Her name was Tracy Brown. She was there for a few years back then. And I asked if she would meet with me. And she is an absolutely lovely, lovely human. My whole family went in and met with her at the office of the American Diabetes Association. She listened to us. She cared about our story. When she first took her position, she decided to do a learning tour. I don't know if you've heard about this. Hell, like part of hell might have frozen over because she decided to go visit Dr. Bernstein herself. And she implemented a low carb diet and came off of her metformin and her type 2 diabetes medications. Anyway, I made friends with her. She actually brought her team to South Dakota with me to do a problem solving session. She believed in what we were doing. She absolutely understood, loved children. Unfortunately, even the CEO for the American Diabetes Association isn't powerful enough to cause any sort of policy change from within. She left that job a year or two later. She's now with Walgreens. It was incredibly exciting and encouraging to see her visit with us, make the effort to come here, but also so sad to see her leave because I think she was defeated. She knew that we weren't going to get anywhere.
Do you think she left on her own choice?
I don't want to assert my opinion.
Fair.
I'm not sure. I mean, she's an amazing woman. I mean, maybe she got a beautiful offer from Walmart. She still cares about people with diabetes because she still is trying to come up with programs at Walgreens to help them. But all I will say is it was very sad to lose her because we had someone in a position of power who wanted something different for people.
I remember when that message first came out, that the president, the CEO of the American Diabetes Association is using low carb and reversing her disease. And it was like, oh, this is amazing. And I can't remember how long afterwards it was maybe a week or so. I hope I'm remembering this right. I've talked about this before. The video that she put out looked like a hostage video. She's sitting there and saying like, oh, well, low carbohydrate is one way, but there's lots of other different ways. And it looked like, I don't know if she was reading from a teleprompter or whatever, but that was a different person.
Totally. I mean, that's the best way I've heard it. It did look like a hostage video. I mean, how sad, but I guess I'm not shocked at this point.
I think back to all the 5Ks that I ran when my mom was diagnosed with cancer, and like how many of my dollars went towards cancer research, versus all the other stuff they did. Those 5Ks were fueled by granola bars to begin with. And my mom didn't have a very good outcome anyway. Like, it's so ridiculous what these organizations can do. And I've been way too kind on them. I've always kind of had the thought of like, oh, they probably just don't know. They haven't found this stuff out. They thought a certain thing. And, now they don't know. And it is so clear by the way you present it. You talk about all the funding. These three main insulin makers are some of the top donors to the American Diabetes Association. Food companies, Coca-Cola, Kellogg's, you name it. They donate to the American Diabetes Association. That is straight up evil. That's terrible. What do you think they're going to say? And do you think they give two craps about whether somebody is getting better or whether somebody needs to buy more food and more insulin? It's ridiculous.
It is, but like, how come no one spotted it long ago? Like, it just happens in front of us and we go, well, okay, I guess that's how it is. Like, but the other thing is that insulin was originally sold to the world for $1.
That blew me away.
These companies supporting the American Diabetes Association, people can't afford insulin. 26-year-olds are dying because they're coming off their parents' insurance and they can't afford it. I don't know if you've heard this, but they're pulling one of our insulins off the market.
Levemir.
Levemir. Sorry, Levemir.
I said it wrong.
It's it's so upsetting. But I hope for change. Yeah. I think now that more people are aware of these things, something will have to give.
Yeah. We interviewed Allison Smart to talk about that. It's such an important thing. And I don't consider those things like, okay, they pull one insulin, we'll just use another insulin. Like, no, they're all different. They're used for different things. And pulling one is a big deal. So yeah, it's great that we have the advocacy work going on. I just
Right.
recently heard another interview from one of my absolute favorite people, Nina Teicholz, and she's on this
Mhm.
podcast and she's talking about like, do you think this is going to be ground up or do you think this needs to be systematic? And she's saying like, well, we tried the grassroots thing for a while and not a lot of people know about this. So we tried to go to the very top and go to where the guidelines are made and get information out there. And how many letters did we all write to our senators and the government and all this stuff? And nothing seems to move the needle because there's so much money involved. And yeah, it's absolutely insane. You mentioned the cost of insulin, and you featured a woman in the story, one of the parents, who talks about buying the $400 vial of insulin. Can you maybe share the story that she shared in there? I don't want to spoil it all, but like, can you share the heartbreaking story
Right.
that she tells?
Right. That was brutal. Oh gosh. They did not have insurance. They work in Hollywood. They don't have typical insurance. And her daughter had recently been diagnosed and she was in the chaos of figuring out her life, went to go draw up some insulin and dropped a full brand new vial of insulin that had cost her $400. It would just liquid on the floor. It's worth nothing. Yeah, that was brutal. And the fact that it ever got to $400 in the first place. It started out as $1. It was a humanitarian, children will die without this life-sustaining medication. And
What was
now
this quote? The Banting quote was like, yeah, this isn't for me, this is for the
for
world.
the world. It's for the world. And now it's a cash cow. You're lucky if you can afford it.
Yep.
You people hoard it, right? That's not good either. People get some and they hoard it or max out their insurance amount so they can have it in case they ever can't afford it or other, there's a shortage and there have been shortages recently. It's
Crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. And the way she phrased it too is that not only is that a liquid on the ground, that's my child's life-saving medication. This isn't optional for us, you know?
no, right,
It's
right.
crazy. Well, okay, so you go through, you tell the story of Ansel Keys and why we changed the guidelines. I love the videos of the old timey, like when the pyramid first came out, and I don't know how you found all of those, but those are great in there. It's really cool to visualize, and the story does get better. You find Dr. Bernstein, his story is absolutely incredible. Is he still practicing?
I believe so. He
Yeah,
is.
so do I. Okay. And yeah, his idea, he had to manage his own diabetes, which sounded terrible back then. For bad as it is now, that sounded awful.
Oh,
You're taking
totally.
stabs in the dark about how much to use and like sharpening reused needles and all kinds of stuff. But he makes this simple conclusion. Once he got the way to check his blood sugar, he's eating lunch. After lunch, his blood sugar is the highest. He looks at what he's eating and he says, okay, it's bread and peanut butter and this other stuff. I think it was tuna fish and mayo. Let me just take out the bread. Sure enough, it helps immensely. And he was, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, same as you, wanting to get the message out to all kinds of people, and had the same response.
Right. Yep. They call him crazy for wanting to be healthy and seeing food as a way to fill your gut, not as like your ultimate joy in life. It is enjoyable, but I mean, it's just right. Yeah. Dr. Bernstein should not have gone through what he had to go through, but I think he's seeing a big positive change. I mean,
Good.
A lot of momentum has happened in the last few years.
Yeah, good. That's really, really good to hear. Yeah, that even back then, writing to other doctors, he wasn't even a doctor at the time. I didn't know that. He was writing
Right.
to other doctors, and they're like, well, if they do this, then we're not going to have any patients anymore. It's so ridiculous. So messed
Right.
up. He goes out and gets his doctorate so he can write the book and get the book
Yeah.
out there, which has changed so many lives. You hear everybody in the documentary say Bernstein, Bernstein, Bernstein. They start to implement, and you see all the success stories, and it's absolutely wonderful. These kids, have you caught up with the kids that you had on the show? Do you follow up with them? Like how is everybody doing today? Do you know?
I stay in touch with most of them.
Right.
Everyone's great. You know, people will have hard times in their life, but eating a steak isn't hard. There are hard things to do. These kids are doing great. RD said it. They're bright kids, athletic kids. There's no gotcha moment. Everyone's doing great.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. Not surprising, but the last kind of screen on the documentary is like, we reached out to all these companies. We reached out to the American Diabetes Association. Obviously, nobody got back to you. We expect that. Disappointing, but of course you'd expect it. Tell us a little bit about your own son, River. How is he doing in particular? It sounds like he's thriving even as a teenager, doing really great.
Right. Oh, he's great. He is the easiest teenager. I lucked out. I can't take credit for him. He's his own unique human. He's very high achieving, focused. He was a nationally ranked tennis player and probably still is somewhere in the ranking, and then decided to go out for football last year. So he took his 182-pound body to 204 pounds, eating this diet. He is lean and built. I think his GPA is 4.2. He's bilingual. He's been involved. My kids went to Spanish immersion school. So through the foundation, he and I have done Zoom meetings with large groups of people from Spanish speaking countries from all over the world. And I can't communicate with them, but he does his best to convey the message. He hasn't taken Spanish medical terminology, but he's using what's happened to him to provide help and assistance to other people, which is a beautiful thing.
That's amazing.
Really
This will be
to a cool man.
That's okay. Okay, so this is going to be really tough to speculate on because it's been so long. He's always looked from the documentary like an absolutely just sweetheart kind of a kid. But I've also wondered too, like what would my school and athletic experience would have been like had I been eating the right way when I was that age? To be exposed to that diet, I would have paid more attention. I would have thrived a little bit more, but my demeanor would have been different. Like, can you say that anything really changed after you changed the diet as far as some of those other things go?
I can tell you it changed everything.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Behavior, like
all of it. He, as a little kid, he was funny and clowny and rascally and adorable, and what you want from a kid. He doesn't have any learning issues, but he was just rowdy and silly and wasn't super focused at school. And that all changed. He's like, I just feel like he's more calm. There's no way he could have done the sports that we do if he'd have stayed on that diet. As a 12 and under tennis player, he was ranked 62 in the country. When we travel to these tournaments, sometimes he'll play more than 15 hours of tennis in a weekend.
Holy smokes.
There's literally no way with that much cardio. It's one of the harder sports to manage with diabetes because he might go on and play a 45-minute match. He might go out on court and play a 3-hour match. We don't know, but he couldn't have done it with insulin on board. It just wouldn't have been part of who he is. So it has completely shaped him. Right now, his essay in English, the prompt was to write about an experience in your life that changed you. And he's like, Mom, the story's telling itself. Like, I've got this one nailed. I'm done. I have my rough draft done. He has a story to tell in life that has completely shaped who he is. And we can't wait to see what he does with all of this. He's so much more mature than an average 16-year-old.
Wow. That's incredible. Doesn't surprise me at all. Watching the video of him play tennis as a 12-year-old, like, damn, this kid could smoke me. Imagining him on a football field, I don't think so. We got to get him on some ice skates so my hockey team can recruit him or something.
There you go. You'd beat him.
Yeah, wow. It sounds like he would be a hell of a hockey player too. Okay, so when you change the diet, I'm assuming 100% of the motivation to change the diet of the entire family was to help your son. Is that correct? Did you know anything else about low carbohydrate diets and any other benefit? 100% doing this for a son.
100% for him. It was worth it. Cold turkey, pulled everything out of the house. The funny thing is, I had a meeting with the JDRF the next morning. They wanted to talk to me somehow, which is the timing of it's so crazy. And I met them and they wanted to meet at a bagel store. And I had River along and I didn't have the book yet. It was on a Monday morning. So I'm like, low carb, how do we do this? What do I do? So I asked the people at the bagel shop to scoop out the innards of the bagel and fill it with egg and sausage. Like, I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew we were doing lower carbs. So if I had to scoop the innards out of a bagel, that's how I was starting our journey. It was completely for him, but it affected us all so positively. It's why, even my husband, in his practice, there are many people with diabetes, and I need to be sensitive with how I say this because it can bring about some judgment, but he will be very honest. with his type 2 patients with type 2 diabetes, if they came in with an A1C of 8%, 9%, 10%, which is very, very, very common, he thought they were not being compliant. He thought it was a reflection of them not doing what their doctors told them. And I mean, that's humbling as a physician in your second decade of practicing when, or maybe it was his third, when River was diagnosed. All of a sudden, his empathy and ability to see these patients weren't given a strategy. I mean, I saw something pop up on Facebook yesterday. It was a brand new, like 1-day dietary guideline for a person newly diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, 226 carbs in 1 day for type 2.
Criminal.
So it's not that they're not compliant or not trying, and the other qualities you attribute to someone not trying. Are they lazy? Have they given, like, there's all sorts of things that go around, and he saw these patients with a new, education, a new way to see what was happening. And now he takes all kinds of time with his patients who want to lose weight, want to get healthier. He tells them River's story. He tells them how we eat. Some of his patients, their lives have completely changed. And I love, to have a doctor actually tell you the truth about how to accomplish something is a bonding experience. So it's really made his job more rewarding. To
incredible.
Be enlightened like this. Mm-hmm.
So great to hear that. Yeah, that's amazing. And it must be doubly powerful because he's got the personal story, but he's also an orthopedic. So it's like, listen, I know how this is going to go. You're going to see me in a few years and it's not going to be great. Let me tell you. So it must be very powerful coming from him. I love when doctors are starting to show up and appreciate their work because they're actually affecting change. That's amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I was really hoping you were going to answer that question that way, that 100% of the motive to go low carb was for your son. Any other consternation from any other members of your family who now had to do a new diet, a different diet, foods they maybe liked? You weren't going to not do it that way anyway, but like, was anybody else upset initially at changing the diet? Everybody was on board.
Well, it's hard work. I've said this on our blog. It wasn't easy. I don't want someone to think like we made this decision and they were like, okay, this is exciting. I don't want pizza anymore anyway. No, it was hard work. I made the low carb version of pizza and tried to adjust their taste buds. And I'm very honest that it took 6 weeks and it wasn't easy. And there were moments of complaining. There were moments where I would spend all this time to make this low carb version and they just hated it. And I threw it away in my kitchen that was all torn up because it was being remodeled. It was not easy, but I say this, it was so worth it. And you have to commit to something. It's not easy to quit alcohol. It's not, there are things that are worth it in life that don't come naturally. And I love to tell people, I didn't love to cook. I didn't know what I was doing, but I tried, and now I've gotten to be very, very good at cooking. A lot of people will comment, I don't know how to make that browned hamburger, the ground beef, brown, there are people with very low cooking skills, but you can get good at cooking. You just have to try it and you have to learn. So yes, it was hard work. It was, a lot of experimenting with different foods. And now that we're past that, I kind of see a common journey with people who decide to do this diet. People will either go cold turkey like we did or gradually reduce things. I personally think it's easier to go cold turkey. Make the decision, deal with the consequence, commit to a few hard weeks of changing things. But people very early on, they make every kind of low carb food, every kind of high carb food in a low carb way. So they're having almond flour pancakes and they're having almond flour pizza and they're making almond flour French fries. Like that's kind of the first phase is you take all the foods they love and you make them in a different way. Well, then you get tired of doing that. And almond flour after so long kind of gets a little grainy and dry. And then you're like, well, wait, let's do these burgers and a little low carb treat. And so then people start bringing the real food in and realize it's so much easier to do that. To now, my son is a teenager. He doesn't want a low carb version of the old thing. He told me a few weeks ago, we would make like cream cheese and almond flour waffles. And he said, Mom, just the cream cheese and almond flour is just too heavy in the morning. Could I have 4 eggs over easy instead? So now, like his diet, he doesn't care about the low carb treats. He doesn't care about the hacked fake this or that or fake donut, or he just wants burger, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, real food. And my cooking has gotten so easy. At first it was hard and challenging working with all these new things. And now it's like I keep protein in the refrigerator and frozen vegetables, and it's a piece of cake.
Yeah.
So there is like an evolution of going low carb. Like you have to get your kid to buy in, you have to show them that they can still do some things. But really, as they get to be teens, at least for a boy, it becomes so easy.
I see that pattern with everybody. My dinner last night was steak and eggs, and the ingredients were steak and eggs.
Wow.
I know, really tough. Okay, perfect. So you're changing the diet for the family. He's feeling better. What are the unexpected kind of benefits that the rest of the family notice? You yourself personally, like, there's all these things that people are like, wow, like I had no idea I had X or Y or Z got better. Like, what other things did you and the rest of the family kind of notice, to the extent that I would argue, I'm sure, even if River was not diagnosed type 1, you'd probably want to stay on the diet as well.
Oh, for sure. Oh, there's no going back. I mean, for me, I have asthma. My asthma totally improved. I must have been, I mean, I'm guessing I had like a gluten intolerance or some sort of wheat mild food allergy causing some asthma. I don't have that at all anymore. My husband lost some weight. He feels great, sleeps better. My oldest son is a D1 tennis player. His athletic conditioning is phenomenal. And this is the funny part. He went off, he's a freshman this year, and part of his training program, he met with a nutritionist and they said, what are you eating? And their 2 recommendations were eat more protein and drink Elementi electrolyte pads. I was like, okay, we're doing that. We got that nailed. Like, it was refreshing to hear an athletic program not say, oh, you need more sugar and you need more carbs. Like, that was really impressive to me. So there were, I mean, just so many benefits, plus just the whole experience, the family experience. We travel so much for tennis. So we have gotten to be steakhouse family. Like we do this. They are kind of steak snobs. They like to try that wherever we go, and they have a rating from all the restaurants across the country. But it's a bonding experience, right? Cooking is a bonding experience. There are so many other beautiful things, and I mean, I think the biggest one is delayed gratification and logical consequences. If you know you feel like crap after eating something, don't eat it. If you feel amazing after eating a steak and some broccoli, keep eating that. And it's just rewired their brains.
That's amazing advice. I love that. I think if people just pay attention to how hungry they feel or how soon they feel hungry after a meal, like you eat a low carbohydrate meal, you go this weird amount of time without feeling hungry and you don't really need to snack. I think that's great advice that you're giving there. Okay, so tell us a little bit more about the nonprofit, the foundation. What is your, not only your mission, but also like the vision for the future?
Well, the end goal was always to have the message for newly diagnosed families that you can choose this pathway and eat high carbs and dose insulin, or you can choose this pathway and change your diet. We haven't gotten there yet, right? We're spreading the message. We did the documentary. We hosted a low carb diabetes camp in the summer. Unfortunately, I lost my mom to ALS last year, so I took like a year of doing minimal work. I'm not hosting a gala this year. I'm kind of trying to figure out my next step, what the best plan will be. I would love to do gatherings. I wouldn't mind doing some public speaking as I travel. It's yet to be determined. I'm just kind of pulling out of my funk now. So hopefully I can dive back in.
I can definitely tell you, you would be more than welcome on a low carbohydrate conference stage for sure. I would be stunned if you could ever get into like a normal like diabetes conference. The struggles that RD has had to try to do that has been crazy. But yeah, getting on to like a low carbohydrate conference, I'm sure everybody would absolutely love and love the story. Yeah, are you hopeful? Are you optimistic for the future as far as the message getting out?
Oh, I think we're sitting in the best position now that we have been. I mean, but this is a cute part of the story is I've been doing this so long, I'll get messages and someone will say, went to the endo today. They had a sign on the wall that said, don't follow mommy bloggers, or went to my endo and they said, don't follow Let Me Be 83. Like there are places who flag their patient medical records with the number 83 at the top so they can identify the weirdos who do a low carb diet. This happens in my own city. Where was I going with that? They don't want my point is that the message is everywhere. They can't shut up mommy bloggers because they're now everywhere. The message is there. The food options are there. You know, if you do need this prepackaged snack, it's there. If you need noodles that are made with egg whites, they're available. I mean, yes, it's processed, but it's still minimal ingredients that you can, you know, use from time to time. So everything's gotten so much easier. I think there's an awareness now to question the things that are told to us, to just have a natural curiosity if our best interests are actually being represented. I feel very, very, very hopeful.
Yeah,
and I feel like we made it, right? No doctor can threaten me right now because my kid is 6'1" and 204 pounds. Like we achieved our goal. I dare you to come at me and tell me that he's not going to grow. Like it's
I love that.
Great feeling. Mm-hmm.
I love that. Well, I'm so glad you're optimistic about it. I kind of come and go in different phases and wonder whether anything is really going to systematically change one day, but your optimism is very infectious. It's cool also to think that, you know, I'm very sorry to hear about your mother, but you were able to take the time to kind of step back because everything was so well done to begin with. Like your website is great. The infographics are awesome. The blogs are great. Like the recipes, everything is there. If somebody has that as a resource, they're really running out of excuses because everything is very well organized. And since you did it right the first time, it allowed you that time to kind of step back and take the time with family. So it's good that you did it right from the very beginning.
Thank you. Thank you. All of it was worth it. I would do it again. It's been very rewarding. I've met amazing people, connected with beautiful children. I mean, the rest of my life, I'll watch them grow and become amazing humans. So it's been great work. Not one that I would have chosen or known was going to be my path in life, but I absolutely love it.
Good for you. Good for you. That's absolutely amazing. As far as the documentary goes, it's not a new documentary. It's been out for a few years. As you look back, obviously a tremendous amount of work, but just based on some of the experiences you've had in the last few years, is there anything you would have maybe, if you had to make the documentary today, not that you go back and change it, but if you had to do it today, is there anything that you would overemphasize, emphasize more, add in, take away, or would it be pretty much the same thing?
You know, I'm just going to be proud of myself and say I think I would do it.
Hell yeah.
Similarly. At that moment, it was the best I could do, and I really felt proud of it. It might be dated information now and dated products, but no, I'm very content with it.
Excellent. That is a great answer and a great way to wrap up this conversation. This has been amazing, Bethany. I really, yeah, the documentary is striking. I'm so glad you made it. I'm sure it was way more work than you ever thought it was going to be. So cool to see, you know, different parts of your family, your husband, yourself, your child, all that stuff involved in the documentary as well. You did a great job. Again, mixing the storytelling with the science and with the facts and the history. All of it is there. I think it holds up great. I'm very happy to hear that you're very proud of making it. You very well should be. So thank you so much for all of that work, the work that you do with, I'm going to give it up, 83andMe. Right. Let me be 83. Excuse me. Let me be 83.
Yes, any way you say it. As long as 83 is in there.
Perfect. Yeah. I'll wait till the very end of the episode to give something up. Really proud of all your work. And I'm glad you are as well. Where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you and your work?
Most of my information's on Facebook. If I do a daily blog, it's under Let Me Be 83. The website is letmebe83.org. On there, I have like a link to an Amazon store with cookbooks, the Dr. Bernstein book, various things we keep in our kitchen, low carb products you can order on Amazon. It's all there.
Yeah, it's like I said, it is all there. Like it's so easy to click through the resources and see all of that stuff. It is a very helpful and it's a great place to know that I can send somebody there and know that they are going to find all the right information. Those resources are really, really helpful for those of us who are on the ground and trying to help people make sense of this. So as for now, Bethany, thank you again so very much for taking time out of your busy day to be on our show and share the story. It's absolutely wonderful. We're so grateful to hear that River is doing absolutely amazing and that you're doing great as well. So thank you so very much for appearing on our show today. We really appreciate you.
So nice to chat with you, and I'm wishing you a year with lots of snow.
Thank you very much for wishing that as well. Yes. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.